The air was still when the letter arrived, a plain white envelope. Resting awkwardly on Ayaan's cluttered kitchen table, as if it didn't belong in this modest life he had built for himself. He opened it slowly, expecting another bill. Another reminder of how carefully he had to tread through adulthood. But what spilled out wasn't a request, it was a gift. And a question. His grandfather had passed away 2 weeks earlier, a quiet man with quiet habits and a quiet fortune. No one really understood. Inside the envelope, a number stared back at Ayaan. $50,000. Not a lottery win, not a dream, but real, tangible. His, and with it came a silence heavier than any joy. He sat alone in his apartment that night, lights dimmed to the glow of the city. Blinking through the window blinds, the money could change things. Pay off his student debt, help him move out of the cramped flat, maybe even start the design business he'd sketched in notebooks for years. But another voice echoed louder, one he hadn't heard in a while, his father's. The market isn't safe, Ayaan. It'll take everything from you when you're not looking. The memory hit sharp. 2008, he was just a kid, but he remembered the fear in their home, not spoken but soaked into the walls. His parents whispering behind closed doors, the fridge slowly emptier, the nights longer and colder. One day they were fine. The next, gone. The market crash, they called it. But for Ayaan, it felt like betrayal. So now, holding this sudden inheritance, the same fear returned, polished, older, more dressed up. Don't risk it, it said. You'll lose it all, just like they did. Stared at his phone. Financial apps glowing with possibilities. Stocks, index funds, ETFs. The world of investing felt like a casino wrapped in a suit. Everyone said it worked, but deep inside, something pulled him back. And so, the money sat in his account, silent, untouched, like a ticking clock he didn't dare wind. He wasn't ready to lose again. The past never leaves quietly. Days passed, but Ayaan couldn't shake the weight. The money was still sitting in his account, untouched. Yet it followed him like a shadow, to work, to bed. To the quiet moments in between where his thoughts spoke louder than the world around him. He thought of his father more now.
Not the
version he saw in family photos, proud and upright, but the one whose shoulders slumped lower each evening as the financial news played in the background. The man who once believed in the system, only to be betrayed by it. Ayaan remembered. The night it all changed. It was late, well past bedtime, but he had crept down the hall, drawn by the low voices of his parents. His father sat in silence, the phone clutched in his hand. The market had crashed again. The retirement, their savings, even the college fund all sliced down overnight. I should have pulled out, his father whispered. I saw the signs. I just didn't want to believe it. His mother said nothing, just placed a hand over his and stared at the floor. That moment, though never spoken of again, etched itself into Ayaan's bones like a scar passed down through blood. It wasn't just money his father lost that year. It was belief. Belief in growth, belief in risk. Belief in the idea that the future could be brighter if you simply trusted the numbers now. Years later, Ayaan could feel that ghost moving through him that inherited caution, that deep-rooted doubt. The kind you don't question because it doesn't come as a thought. It lives as instinct. Every article he read about long-term investing was drowned out by a single image, his father's blank stare, the weight of invisible loss. And yet Ayaan wasn't sure if he feared the market or becoming his father. He closed his laptop one evening without clicking the Invest Now button. Not tonight. Not yet. The ghost still had his hand. Sometimes the universe sends people not to teach you something new, but to remind you of what you've buried. She arrived on a Tuesday. Ayaan didn't notice her at first, the new project. Consultant at his firm, all sharp lines and clean confidence. Her name was Lena, and she spoke in a rhythm that felt like she had already seen the ending of every story and still chose to show up for the first scene. In the break room, one afternoon, talk turned to money. It always does, quietly between the lines. A colleague mentioned market volatility. Another joked about their savings going down with the S&P. But Lena didn't flinch. I lost half my net worth once, she said, sipping coffee like she was talking about the weather. The room froze. Ayaan looked up from his cup. She didn't look like someone who had lost anything polished, poised, radiating calm. Maybe that's why he believed her. "What happened?" he asked, surprising even himself. She shrugged. "I panicked during the 2020 dip. Sold everything. Sat on cash for months. A beat passed. Then the market recovered. Fast. I missed the whole rebound." Ayaan expected regret. Bitterness. But Lena just smiled, not with pride, but with peace. "That mistake taught me everything I needed to learn. Now I invest on autopilot. I don't look. I don't flinch." He nodded, not sure what to say. But something in her voice lingered. Not the content, but the calm. She had been through the fire, come out with a kind of freedom later. That night, her words echoed louder than the headlines he scrolled past. "I don't flinch." Ayaan wondered what it felt like to trust the process like that, to live with the loss and still believe. Lena had lost money and gained courage. He, on the other hand, still had the money, but none of the courage. And for the first time, it felt like the greater loss. The line between fear and action is invisible until you try to cross it. Ayaan couldn't stop thinking about what Lena had said. "I don't flinch." The phrase looped in his head like a dare. That night, he sat at his desk, lit only by the glow of his monitor. He had done the research, watched the videos, read the blogs, calculated the risks. He wasn't planning to bet big, just a small amount. Test. A signal to himself that he could start. He transferred $500 into his brokerage account. Just seeing it there made his heart race. The screen offered dozens of options, blinking and shifting in real time. Charts, candlesticks, terms he half understood. His fingers hovered. The market was red, not crashing, just dipping. A mild pullback, as the experts called it. The perfect time to buy, they said. Still, his thumb hesitated. He could almost hear his father's voice again. "The moment you trust it is the moment it turns on you." But this wasn't the past. This was Ayaan, now. He clicked buy. It was done. It's just like that. For a few minutes, he felt something strange. Not triumph, not pride. Just quiet discomfort, like stepping into cold water. Waiting for the shock to fade. The next morning, he checked his portfolio. Down 3%. His stomach dropped. It was only $15, the price of lunch. But it didn't feel small. It felt like failure. Confirmation. Proof that the old fear had been right all along. Within minutes, he sold. The money came back into his account. Minus a few dollars. Safe. Controlled. Whole again. But Ayaan didn't feel relief. He felt disappointed. Not in the market. Not in the loss. In himself, he had drawn the line. Stepped over it, and the moment things got uncomfortable, he ran back. Later that day, while walking home, he passed a red pedestrian signal. He stared at it longer than he should have, then muttered aloud, almost without thinking. I flinched. It's one thing to fear the market. It's another to realize you've been fearing it for all the wrong reasons. Ayaan visited his uncle's house that weekend, a man who, for most of his life, had been his second father. After the crash, his parents had leaned on him for advice, and Ayaan grew up hearing his warnings like gospel. The market's rigged. Never trust it. Build slowly. Save cash. Keep control. His uncle lived modestly. Same old house, same creaky wooden furniture, same thick curtain of caution in every sentence. Ayaan had always admired that. It felt safe. Real. They sat in the backyard, sipping tea under a rusted tin shade. When Ayaan brought it up, not the inheritance, not the loss, just the fear. I tried investing, he admitted. Didn't last a day. His uncle nodded, solemnly, just as Ayaan expected. Good. You did the right thing. You've got to be smarter than the market. Can't win at someone else's game. Ayaan stared down at his cup, the liquid trembling slightly in his hand. But Lena at work. She invests. Everyone talks about long-term gains. Isn't it working for them? His uncle scoffed. They're lucky or naive. But something in his tone felt ... off, like a rehearsed line, not a truth. Later that evening, Ayaan wandered inside to help his aunt with the dishes. As she reached into the cabinet above the fridge, something fell. A stack of folders from the top shelf. A stack of property files, investment portfolios, stock statements. Dozens. Of them all in his uncle's name. Ayaan froze. These weren't abandoned or outdated. They were recent, organized, growing. For a moment, couldn't breathe. It wasn't the investments that stunned him. It was the silence, the secrecy, the contradiction between the life his uncle projected and the reality he'd built. Quietly behind the curtain, why? Why warn against the very thing he was doing? That night, Ayaan sat in his car for a long time before turning the key. He didn't feel angry. Not really, he felt betrayed. All this time, the voice that shaped his caution was not coming from fear. It was coming from protection. Maybe even possession. As if hoarding knowledge, like hoarding wealth, made him safer. Ayaan realized something in that moment. His fear didn't start with the market. It started with trust. And it was trust that had been broken. The hardest enemy, too. Fight is the one that lives inside you. After discovering the truth about his uncle, Ayaan didn't rage. He didn't confront. He didn't even bring it up. He just withdrew like a wave pulling back before the crash. But something had shifted. The distrust that once faced outward was now turning inward. Every decision he had made or avoided felt like it needed re-examination. Not financially, emotionally, psychologically. He booked a session with a therapist. It wasn't about money, not officially. That's not what he said in the intake form. He wrote something vague. Clarity, confidence, decision, fatigue. But in his heart, he knew what he was really asking. Why am I so afraid of losing money? Even when I know keeping it means falling behind. The therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Rima, listened quietly as he unraveled his story. The inheritance, his father's collapse, the panic sell, the secret investments. She didn't interrupt. She didn't offer strategies, just space. And then she said something Ayaan wasn't ready for. You don't fear the market, fear the feeling of powerlessness. He blinked. Losing control, she continued, reminds you of when everything collapsed, when your parents couldn't protect you. It's not money you're afraid of losing. It's certainty, safety, that illusion we all cling to. Sat there, stunned. It made too much sense. His obsession with checking balances, his need to plan every move, downed his paralysis when things became unpredictable. All of it. A response. A defense. An armor he had. It's built around a child's memory of chaos. He wasn't fighting the market. He was fighting the ghost of a little boy hiding behind a hallway door. Listening to grown-up voices break under the weight of a crash. That night, Ayaan didn't touch his portfolio. He didn't research. He didn't run simulations instead. He sat in silence and asked himself a question he'd never dared ask. What if I'm not here to outsmart the market, but to outgrow the fear that shaped me? Courage doesn't arrive with fanfare sometimes. It shows up as a whisper. Ayaan didn't wake up feeling braver. He didn't stare at the mirror with a motivational quote echoing in his head. It was a Tuesday, slightly overcast. The kind of day that feels like background noise in someone else's life. But when he opened his laptop, something had settled inside him. Not confidence, exactly, but something firmer than fear. A kind of stillness. He logged into his brokerage account, the same one he had abandoned weeks ago. Its balance was there, unchanged. Waiting, mocking, forgiving. This time, he didn't scroll endlessly. He didn't look for patterns or signals or approval from headlines. He already knew what he was going to do. Not everything, not even most of it. Just something, a simple index fund. Broad, boring, balanced. Nothing flashy, nothing heroic. Ayaan didn't need heroism. He needed motion. He set up a recurring investment. $200 a month, automated, invisible, designed not for drama, but for consistency. It would pull from his account without asking, without requiring him to overcome the weight of hesitation every single time as he clicked confirm. He didn't feel a rush. He felt the kind of peace that comes after exhaling a breath you didn't realize you were holding. This wasn't the leap you see in movies. No thunderclap, no swelling orchestra. It was small, unseen, but it was real, for the first time. Ayaan was no longer standing at the edge of his life. Analyzing the drop, he had taken a step forward, and whether he flew or fell no longer mattered as much as the fact that he had moved. Progress is rarely a straight line. 2 months passed. Ayaan stuck to his plan. Each time his phone buzzed with the monthly investment confirmation, he smiled quietly to himself, not because of the amount, but because it meant he had kept going. There were no fireworks, no windfalls, just the steady rhythm of action. But then came the headlines. Market in free fall. Investors panic as global shock ripples through economy. It started small. A sudden geopolitical crisis. A few volatile days, then a correction, then a slide. Stocks dipped hard, harder than Ayaan had ever seen while holding real money inside the market. His portfolio turned red, not by a few dollars, hundreds. Every instinct in him screamed. The ghost stirred again, the boy behind the door. His father's voice, the lessons of loss. He opened the app, finger hovering over the screen. Sell pull. Out now. Cut your losses. Just like last time. Just like always. But then he paused. Not because he wasn't afraid. He was. More than he wanted to admit. But this time, he had a memory stronger than fear. It wasn't his therapist's words, or Lena's calm, or even the logic of long-term investing. It was that quiet moment, 2 months ago, when he chose movement over paralysis, when he decided that his future would not be built on panic. His thumb hovered over the red sell button and then moved away. He locked the screen, got up, went for a walk that evening. As the news anchors spoke of collapse and contagion, Ayaan made dinner. Slowly, mindfully. The market churned in the background. But he didn't check. He had planted something inside himself, and storms, he now understood, were part of growth. There's a silence that follows a storm, not relief, not victory, just clarity. Weeks passed. The market didn't rebound right away. It hovered, wobbled, flirted with further drops. But slowly, almost reluctantly, it began to steady and Ayaan. He didn't check it daily anymore. Not out of detachment, but because he had finally stopped treating the market like a mirror to his self-worth. One morning, while organizing his inbox, he noticed an old spreadsheet, the one he made months ago, filled with savings goals, market simulations, worst-case scenarios. He opened it, curious, and then he laughed. The numbers looked childish now, not because they were wrong, but because they were built on panic, a need to control what could never truly be controlled. He thought back to the early days, the hesitation, the inherited fear, the weight of past voices. Those voices hadn't disappeared, but their volume had faded. 'Cause, for once, Ayaan wasn't just investing in the market, he was investing in time, in patience, in himself. A new routine emerged. Every Sunday morning, he'd sit on the balcony. With a cup of coffee, open his portfolio, glance at the numbers not to react, but to observe. Some weeks it was up. Some weeks it wasn't. But the real measure of progress wasn't in percentages. It was in how little the swings controlled him. One morning, Lena stopped by with a copy of The Psychology of Money. She smiled as she handed it over. Thought, you'd appreciate the long game. Ayaan nodded. He did now not just the logic of compounding wealth, but the quiet revolutionary act of staying in. Wealth isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with luxury, or numbers, or noise. It shows up as freedom, as calm as the quiet confidence of knowing you're no longer running from yourself. Ayaan sat alone one evening. Years later, watching the sun set behind the skyline. His portfolio had grown, not explosively, but steadily. His savings were solid, his habits unshaken. But that wasn't the real achievement. The real wealth was what had changed inside him. He no longer checked the markets to soothe anxiety. He no longer calculated every risk to avoid regret. His relationship with money had softened, matured. He trusted himself now. There were still dips, still uncertainty. But fear no longer ruled the room. It had become a visitor, not a master. And perhaps most beautifully, he had begun to help others. Quietly, a friend who panicked during a correction, a cousin terrified of starting. He didn't lecture, he just shared his story, gently, honestly, the same way Lena once had with him. One night, while clearing out old drawers, he found a folded piece of paper. The first investment confirmation email he had printed and tucked away, just in case. The date was smudged, but he knew exactly when it was. The day he took the first step. The day the cycle broke. Ayaan smiled. He had once believed wealth was about what you earned. Now he understood. True wealth is about what you learn to live without. Fearing, and in that silence, free of panic, free of doubt, he found something he never expected.